In this episode for your Texas real estate exam, we're covering the critical defenses and limitations under the Deceptive Trade Practices Act, or DTPA. Understanding these concepts is essential because the exam will test not just what the DTPA prohibits, but also how a licensee might defend against a claim and what time limits apply. First, let's tackle the statute of limitations. For the exam, you must know it's a two-part rule. A consumer has 2 years from the date they discovered, or reasonably should have discovered, the deceptive act to file a lawsuit. This is called the discovery rule. However, there's a hard stop. No claim can be filed more than 4 years after the deceptive act occurred, regardless of when it was discovered. The exam loves to create scenarios to trap you here. For example, a buyer closes on a home in 2023. In 2026, 3 years later, a contractor discovers the seller's agent intentionally hid evidence of a cracked foundation. The buyer has 2 years from this discovery to file a claim. But because it's already been 3 years since the act, they actually only have 1 year left before the absolute 4-year limit expires. Next is the good faith defense. This is a crucial defense for licensees. If you are sued under the DTPA, you can argue that you relied in good faith on information provided by another source. This could be information from a seller's disclosure notice, an appraiser, or a professional inspector's report. The key is that you had no reason to believe the information was false or inaccurate. On the exam, a question might describe a scenario where an agent relays information from a seller's disclosure that the roof is only 2 years old. If the buyer later finds out the roof is 10 years old and sues the agent can use the good faith defense by showing they reasonably relied on the seller's written statement. Now, let's discuss DTPA waivers, a heavily tested topic. It is extremely difficult to get a valid waiver of DTPA rights in Texas. The requirements are incredibly strict. A waiver is void unless it is in writing, signed by the consumer. The consumer is not in a significantly disparate bargaining position, and this is the most important part. The consumer is represented by their own legal counsel. The attorney cannot be someone suggested or chosen by the licensee or seller. An exam question might present a waiver signed by a buyer at closing. If that buyer did not have their own independent attorney advise them on the waiver, that waiver is unenforceable. Here's a phrase to remember. For a DTPA waiver to hold water, the consumer's own attorney must be at the quarter. Finally, you must understand the relationship between the DTPA and TREC violations. The DTPA has what's known as a tie-in provision. This means that a violation of another law can also be considered a violation of the DTPA. Specifically for your exam, a violation of the Texas Real Estate License Act, or TRELA, can be grounds for a DTPA lawsuit. So, if a licensee commits an act of misrepresentation that violates a TREC rule, they haven't just violated a TREC rule. They have likely also committed a deceptive act under the DTPA, opening them up to significant civil liability, including the possibility of treble damages if the act was committed knowingly. For free practice questions, AI-powered explanations, and more exam prep tools, visit openexamprep.com. That's openexamprep, all one word, .com.